Through more than 2 decades at Kenner and Hasbro, Aaron built worlds, told stories, and designed toys for some of pop culture's biggest names, including Transformers, Batman, Star Wars, and more. Join him as he explores the archives and tells you the stories of the creative process behind your favorite toys. This is the Toy Armada with your host, Aaron Archer.
So we are on the Toy Armada. It is episode 1, and I am your host, Protoman, here today also with Aaron Archer. Aaron, how you doing?
Hey, how's it going?
Alrighty, so I figured because it's going to be episode 1, it would just be perfectly topical that we start with the legendary Star Wars episode 1 and Star Wars in general that Aaron worked on. And it's, you know, Kenner's Star Wars and Star Wars in general as a toy line cannot be understated just how important it is just to toys in general and everything. I mean, that's a whole topic in itself in a lot of ways. But what we're going to do is we're going to chronologically go through everything in terms of Star Wars with Aaron Archer here today that he dealt with, but also just we're gonna dial it back. We're gonna go back in time a little bit. So first, what I want to know more than anything is, what was your first encounter with the Star Wars brand? Not as an employee of Hasbro or Kenner or anything, but as a fan. Like, when did you first encounter Star Wars?
Yeah, so I am of that era that saw Star Wars in its original run in the theater. So I was 5. So I don't know a time really without it. But I think I had an X-Wing pilot or a Hammerhead was probably my first touch with it. But it was everywhere from my memory, from like it being some kind of cultural thing. But from then on, I was hooked with the art of books and the pre-production art and how they did all that stuff. And so I was one of those Star Wars kids that lived with it for many, many years after the original films.
How influential would you say it is to you in terms of, like, let's say, art or storytelling?
Big time. For me, particularly the art of books, Joe Johnston and the Ralph McQuarrie art, was huge. I had that stuff hanging around the portfolios hanging around my room as a kid. I didn't have sports stars or cars or any of that stuff. I had Star Wars pre-production art hanging on my walls. So yeah, really, really big. And I still think I draw some spaceships a lot like some of those guys, or what I learned from looking at those books. So
now when we kind of get into, like, you going into the toy industry, early Kenner and stuff like that, where was Star Wars at that point? Like, what year was that, would you say, when you first got into Kenner?
Well, I got into Kenner in 95.
Okay.
But previous to that, Star Wars, for those of us of that era that loved it, and then it just disappeared for a long time. Lucasfilm didn't really do anything for a long time. We all know that. And I have the hardback Thrawn trilogy because it was like, for the first time, something awesome was happening. And then certainly the role-playing games from West End Games was a big deal too, because it was like, oh, more Star Wars content, or depth of characters or worlds or aliens and stuff. So that was really cool if you wanted to stay in that Star Wars world. And from there, the toys started coming back out and everything that we're going to get into. But I was still living Star Wars pre-episode 1.
Okay, so like what you mentioned before, especially so around that time in Kenner, like I would have to say around 97, 98, was, in my opinion, was like the renaissance of Star Wars in a lot of ways, because here comes Kenner. They're doing their Power of the Force collection, the legendary 12-figure orange card back, which exploded in terms of popularity. It's debatable, the sculpts and everything. Some people weren't a fan of roided out Luke Skywalker, but it really was like this watershed moment for Star Wars, because here comes these action figures after literally a drought for years. Yeah, you had the Ewok toys and droids and stuff like that, but this was a full-fledged Star Wars line. And then coupled with the fact here comes the special edition movies that are going to be released or re-released, I guess, in theaters with new edition scenes. So what was, here's like 97, 98, Aaron Archer during that time when Star Wars is in this renaissance, it's back in theaters in a sense. Where are you at that point?
Yeah, so I was at Kenner. My actual mentor at Kenner in the design area, a guy named Mike Brand, who's passed, and it's very sad that he has, but he was the guy that did that whole first wave of Star Wars figures.
Oh, wow.
And he also did Legends of the Batman, which also has a posed kind of thing. He was one of the first designers to do poses on action figures at Kenner that weren't straight up and down 5 points of articulation. And
for people that are listening that don't know, what is 5 points of articulation? Because we'll always have people.
Yeah. So, the old Star Wars figures were very basic: legs, shoulders, head. And that's a standard, basic action figure articulation.
For people that still want that, you could go to Super 7. They still do that with their reaction.
It's very nostalgic.
It's a nostalgic kind of articulated style. But anyway, sorry, continue.
Yeah, so he was he got put on Star Wars to do those, to bring a little bit more, because at the time Star Wars was dead. Who's going to buy old characters? Let's bring them into the vernacular of the era, which was more 90s muscular, roided out heroes, and kind of present Star Wars in that way. What was interesting is that was the way they decided to present it from the jump, instead of maybe more classic and then present it some different way. But back then, we did not consider collectors at all in 0%. I cannot stress that enough.
I want to grab something you said there. So the choice to do the muscular Luke Skywalker and Han Solo, and even that of the Stormtrooper that's like buff. That was a decision made because of, like, I guess the influence of 90s, like Rob Liefeld and, I guess the comic books at the time. Was really what led to that?
Sure.
Oh, wow. Okay, interesting. I never heard that take. Interesting. Okay.
Yeah, I mean, there's no other reason why that wouldn't have been then very photo referenced. It was a purposeful making them more powerful characters. Because Kenner, you're going to hear this when we talk about Batman, but here we'll talk about Star Wars. Kenner had an aversion to guys in suits, old men in suits as toys. They did not like the Alfreds, the Ra's al Ghuls, Commissioner Gordons. They were boring. So Star Wars, if you think of Han Solo in a parka, not too exciting.
Is that due to something that they've had in their past that didn't sell well? Like,
it was just a marketing attitude. Like, let's just not do like Bob the Goon old men type one-off weird characters. They'd had enough of that. Or it was just a particular vibe that the head folks at that point had. I don't know, but that was a very, old men in suits aren't cool.
For people that aren't familiar, Bob the Goon was, if anyone remembers the 1989 Tim Burton Batman movie, there was Joker's right-hand man. He had a action figure with the Toy Biz Batman series, which was notoriously one of the worst shelf warmers of all time. Not Sarlacc Keeper level, but pretty up there. Pretty up there.
Yeah.
And he was a bald dude in a suit, pretty much.
Yep.
Like,
so
no joke.
This is how these things happen. Yeah.
Yeah. What I also wanted to kind of hyper focus on is, you mentioned, like, here's this legendary guy that sculpted these. What is your feeling? And I've had this discussion with a few different designers. What is your feeling about designers and sculptors getting credited? Comic book writers and artists, they get credited on their comics.
Sure. Sure.
Movie directors and everything like that, actors, even some of the extras, they're in the credits. What's your feeling on the fact that sculptors and designers, sometimes you turn around the back of the card back, there's tons of space there. No line for sculpted by so and so?
Yeah. I can see it from all angles. I don't know what my personal feeling is. I lived in the obviously, let's not do that. So many people work on toys. It's hard to identify any one person. that should be called out. Now, there's obviously times where some superstar or focused designer, sculptor, could have their name on it and should. I'm an artist. I would love people to know the stuff I worked on versus what I didn't work on. But I was also paid by the corporation, and you become a little nameless that way. So I grasp that too.
Well, it's also because the way I see it is like, yeah, back then, in the same way, kind of like Bob Kane never got credited for years. So at the time you could almost kind of forgive it because of just the way they're thinking. But it's kind of like today. Like, when would you never see Bob Kane's name, even when it's a Batman book he has nothing to do with?
Yeah.
Because of just how important it is to the character. It's the same thing where, like, today, do you think it should be a thing? Do you think, like, if someone really had a lion's share?
Only if it was going to be promoted that way, probably, is my mindset. Like,
if the name means something.
Yeah, probably.
Okay. I've always been curious about their takes on that, just because of working with different creators throughout the years and how, like, you look at, again, movies, video games, comic books, all of those other mediums that nerds and geeks and all of us absolutely consume. But here's the toy world, and it
changes over because it's manufactured.
I guess so.
And the manufacturer is the primary, and they just hire people to get things done, where a comic book is publishing, and that's a whole different kind of vibe.
I'm glad you brought up his name, because I've never heard the name before. Like, and considering how those toys were a big part of my adolescent years and stuff like that, like it's nice to know that there's a name with those creations and stuff like that, and hearing those stories are very important. So getting back to, again, Power of the Force, it's blowing up and everything. It goes to the green card backs. Yeah. It's even opening up more to just all kinds of characters. Now we're even getting like the crazy secondary characters. Now all of a sudden Royal Guard and everybody's getting a toy. And here's Kenner seeing there's something here. Star Wars is literally catching fire, and the gasoline is just like it's not burning out. So what were the early bubbles of Episode 1 being a thing that you remember from your perspective over there?
That's a good question. The first recollection of any of that was Lucasfilm is going to consider making new content, I think is probably presented that way, in the Star Wars universe, and we were pitching to get that license. When Kenner was pitching to get the license at the earliest stages, which I think is like 96.
Probably, yeah.
Or 95 even.
Really? Okay. 96 would make sense, but 95, but like that's interesting.
Just the pitch on the actual thing we worked on very early, which was just ideas. Like, here, if we, it was almost like we were a pre-production presentation. Like, we're just excited about the Star Wars universe. We can't wait to work with you on more stuff. So early days of toy companies and entertainment companies trying to bubble up some synergy. And so what I do remember, actually, let me look this up real quick.
No problem. No problem.
Okay, so September 6th, I think. I remember because I was in a conference room, and it was the day Cal Ripken Jr. beat the record for most consecutive games played. Mm-hmm. And I remember leaving the conference room after work, where people were staying late, to go home and watch that, because it was really a big baseball moment. And so I'm not even a big baseball fan, but I just thought that was a cool moment to want to see. And so that's how I know when I was working on that, particularly. And I did things like I drew a blue Imperial Guard. I drew some monsters that, feel similar to the Episode 2 monsters. Not saying they are, but just we were vibing. They were going to have a gladiatorial thing, so let's draw gladiatorial type stuff. Very cryptic. We didn't get a lot of information in those early days about Episode 1 or what it would become. Just, this was a new project, and here's what we could do if we got deeper into a new deal with you.
So just to jump in. So at the time, they weren't so much saying, hey, we're planning a prequel episode 1. We're just thinking of new content.
That's my recollection. If
interesting.
If there was more information,
it could have been anything.
I don't think we knew it.
It could have been an episode 7. It could have been something in the middle. Like they were just doing, because especially historically up to that point, we had books, we had comics, we had all this other supplemental material, but nothing that ever was, I guess, animation or film.
And I'll tell you something. If I'm thinking back right now, and maybe memory fails me, but I don't think we touched any main characters.
Interesting.
I think we were drawing monsters, scenarios, spaceships, like toyetic concepts like gladiatorial combat or things like this. The word episode 1 didn't exist. I don't think we knew if it was going to be a continuation of Return of the Jedi, or set way after Return of the Jedi, or way before Star Wars. I don't think we had any recollection truly at that point.
So then what do you think then is after all of that process?
So after that...
Yeah, when did it start to really start shaping up to what we think is, a prequel?
Yeah. So this whole time I'm on Batman, okay? So my close friends are on Star Wars because slowly the company is shifting into this Star Wars team because it's going to be big. So my first memory of it was that people were getting taken out of teams for this new super team. I left Batman in 98. When did episode 1 come out?
99.
Okay. I think I left Batman in 98, late 98. And I became then I even got put on the Star Wars team. So my first actual Star Wars team connection is when I was moved from Batman to that team to help expand the toyetic potential of the Star Wars universe. That is to say, Batman was about play features and innovation.
Yeah, I could see that now.
And rocket launchers and different things.
Especially the Batman you were working on.
Yeah. And Star Wars team and Lucasfilm particularly wanted very replica product. And I was purposely sent over there to make products or push products that had more Kenner toy appeal.
And especially, just to go back a little bit, when you do look at what Power of the Force was doing back in 97, 98, most of the line was 3-inch figures trying to be what was on the screen, comes with maybe one accessory or 2 accessories, no action features.
Yeah.
There was deluxe figures that were, here's Han Solo with this giant, power loader backpack with flip up guns and stuff.
Yep.
But there was more of the bulk, which was 3-inch screen accurate, and I use air quotes here because obviously you could argue how accurate it is to the screen, but screen enough accurate articulated action figures with 1 or 2 accessories. That was the goal of Power of the Force. Really was, again, something unique at the time compared to a lot of other things that were going on.
Yeah.
And yeah, so you coming in would definitely bring more of the other aspect of it that was kind of absent in a lot of different ways outside of vehicles and I guess some play sets.
Yeah. I mean, what I'll say about Kenner, first, foremost, and always, it was a toy innovation, mech tech kind of inventor toy company. They made toys, fun toys that did things. Engineering was a big part of that. Hasbro had a different model a little bit. So all I say is my training goes back to, and the types of toys that were always more excited at Kenner were things that shot stuff, opened up, had a surprise. You did one thing and something else happened. So yeah, some of that early Star Wars stuff, when it's just, again, 5-point articulation, that was seen as kind of boring or old school in-house at the time. So we tried like doing those big backpacks and stuff, and I think those were pretty obvious and over the top. But yeah, you could see where that would come from.
You mentioned Hasbro. I'm going to just jump ahead a little bit quickly. So with Power of the Force, 97, 98, under the Kenner emblem, Episode 1 will be under the Hasbro emblem.
Yep.
Why the change? Maybe you could tell that story there.
Yeah, so obviously the deal for Star Wars, if you've watched any documentaries and stuff, was a big deal. Very expensive deal, very highly sought after from various toy companies. So much so that, the deal included some stock sharings and different things with Lucasfilm. So if you were out in the street and you heard Hasbro spent, what they spent on the contract, but then you went to buy Hasbro toys and you saw Kenner, it was a disconnect for the financial side. So
a bit of a marketing also.
Totally marketing. So Hasbro made a deal with Lucasfilm to get the new rights, very advertisable, very promotable. Let's hope that drives shareholder value. Great. But if it's Kenner, who the heck is Kenner? Kenner is being expunged. It's not a real company. It's a brand name. It's all under Hasbro now. So it's very financial, smart decision just to focus communication towards the name Hasbro, albeit sad that the historic Kenner logo was gone. Very practical in that sense.
Now, we're probably in also other segments in the future and different brands, we're going to talk about Kenner and its slow disappearance from the toy aisles. But do you think that Kenner disappearing was primarily because of this Star Wars move that you just mentioned, or was it just something that was inevitable for that company moving into Hasbro? Yeah,
I mean, again, for total ease of communication of shareholder value, it doesn't make too much sense to have those brand names around floating, but they still get used, the Galoob and the Kenner and the Odds On and things.
I think those are moves. Yeah, the irony in that is now those are used today.
Tonka was its own company.
As marketing now.
Yeah.
Like now it's like, because you'll have, like, let's say we're going to go off topic a little bit, like the new reissue Ghostbuster stuff. Yeah. They'll use the Kenner logo because now it's a marketing thing, if anything.
Yep. It's a nostalgia brand. Yep.
Remember Kenner? So, yeah, it's almost funny how it kind of comes back as a marketing brand when it was the opposite. It was being phased out. And we
do, over the years, we'll talk about it here too, but, to keep those trademarks and contract things alive, you got to use it or you lose it. So even the name of Kenner, a company that is under the umbrella, has to be used.
Yep, that's gonna come up a lot.
Yeah. So
on my podcast, that comes up almost daily.
Yeah.
So the next thing I want to really get into now. So now it's going to be, we're talking a prequel here. When do you really start seeing the very first stuff behind the scenes of, like, what's the direction they're going here, and this young Anakin and the Darth Maul or any of that? Like, what's the first time you see any of that kind of stuff?
Yeah, well, we saw a lot of the pre-production, fair amount of pre-production art, although they didn't send anything that wasn't viable. But we saw a lot of set photography. They had a full kind of every time a character or an actor got into costume or makeup, they would go into a photography studio essentially and be photographed in every angle and all that. Now we would scan those people, right? But at the time we had access to a literally treasure trove of Lucasfilm photography that we would have access to. And
I want to jump in on something you just said there. So, because today now we have the luxury of head scanning actors.
Yep.
Putting them into a digital file and then turning it, especially like with wrestling figures, that's the most common thing. They head scan everybody,
sure.
Top to bottom, topless, these guys, and do these perfect things. Back then, we're talking all the different actors. So you get these photos. It's all sculpted by hand by master sculptors.
You'd get the photos. We'd have to do control art to pose the characters and communicate the toy communication, where it's going to be articulated, which hand the weapon's going to be held in, scale, any details. We also had access to really rich textile photos, not just images of the actors wearing it, but like real close-up of all that Queen Amidala detailing, stuff like that. And and then it goes to a sculptor after various approvals, which is probably what we should get into in a moment.
I was kind of leading to that.
Yeah, to ultimately get sculpted and go forward. So I'm going to just have us half a step back. I come into the team, about a year out from episode 1, actually coming out. And even at that point, we hadn't read a script.
Interesting.
Some people had gone to Lucasfilm and read part of a script in a room that was locked and had a time limit on it, I believe. Very secure. Everything had to be tight. The way that we communicated those photos and data was on a direct line between Lucasfilm and Hasbro. I think it was called a T1 line or something back then. So we had a direct port. No one else could access it. There were literally no doors. Really interesting.
It's like going into a vault, pretty much.
Yeah, we had one guy whose job it was to communicate with the Lucasfilm archive computers to pull out what we needed to do our development.
Amazing.
He's still there. Not doing that role, but yeah. So we would we'd get all that stuff, assemble our toys, present them in-house, get people's opinion, they need more action, and whatever, don't do that guy, another, whatever. And then they'd have to get approved, right, in whatever stage that they were in. So maybe that's where we start with that stuff.
So who have you met, the big names now, during that pre-production process? Where did you go? Are we talking Skywalker Ranch here?
Yeah. So
yeah, let's hear it.
My role there was me and Vicky Stratford, who's still at the company and also goes to Comic-Cons and stuff, so she's out there and known. It was her and I's split role. We went out every other week to San Francisco from Cincinnati, usually on a red-eye, to take whatever stage various products were in, and they were all on a big schedule and everything had to go. I would take boards, I'd take control art, I'd take sculpts, I'd take samples of things, and go through every figure with Lucas licensing. So that at the time was on Lucasfilm Ranch or Skywalker Ranch, the classic, big old Victorian building in the lake and everything. I didn't see any of that. I went around the road, went around to the back of the licensing building, parked in a spot that was, you had to leave your keys in the car because it was near the sound editing area and might, some celebrity sound mixer or composer might also need that spot, and they're going to move your car.
Interesting.
Yeah, weird stuff like that. And we'd sit in a meeting room and just go through, everything. And what I will say about that, it was very interesting to get a perspective of what was happening at the time. If we go back in time, there were a lot of people excited that that these new movies were coming out. A lot of partnerships had been made across the globe to promote books, products, images.
Oh,
all that stuff.
We'll get into that because, I think episode 1. I mean, I could be wrong here, but I have never known a movie or singular product that had more tie-ins than probably episode 1.
Yeah.
Because it's it goes beyond beach towels and it was tackle boxes,
all encompassing.
Yeah, it was every single fast food chain had their usually you have one fast food chain is going to have that movie's toys. But you're going to KFC and there's Star Wars Episode 1. And then you're going to go to Burger King and there's Star Wars Episode 1. It was nuts. Just getting into that, but that's a whole other topic. I want to kind of also pick out a little bit, specifically, were any of your ideas, did you ever feel were going to spin off into something larger that was going to be used on the film at all? Or was it more just you guys are just throwing stuff at walls and hoping they go, oh, that's nice?
No, yeah, we were doing that. We were presenting interesting opportunities, and wherever it went, that's where it went. Different I will say, different partnerships that we'll talk about over the various podcasts were more receptive and or eager to have that kind of dialogue. Lucasfilm was not.
They pretty much had their own crew of guys who were designing creatures, monsters, and of course the main characters themselves. And the Kenner / Hasbro side of thing was really more just to bring those to life, if anything.
Yeah, we were very executional.
Okay.
Here's the picture. So much so that it, for me, as a someone that brings new ideas onto old ideas or spins on old ideas, and that my role in that group was to try to promote more toyetic play. It could be very frustrating having someone just point to a photo and your count is 7 pips on a belt and theirs is 5, and you're gonna have to go back and change something. So it was very detail oriented, we are making a classic here, this is going to change the world. It's very important that we get Jar Jar just right. Stuff like that became a little window into it not being as fun as I'd hoped it was going to be.
In a lot of ways, when you think about it, kind of the future of a lot of the toy industry.
Yeah. That's where we are today.
When you really think about it. I mean, again, we'll ignore like what Super 7 and some of the more nostalgia companies are doing, but just really in general, when you look what Star Wars Black Series is today, Marvel Legends, and the pursuit of just most toy lines really aimed at an older audience in general. Yeah. Which is most toy lines today.
Yeah, well, the market is such
shifted,
different, and so it makes sense that they have to go that way. But at the time, it was more guardianship of what was being created by Lucasfilm, and that's what should be executed. We have so many. The attitude, rightly so, was we have so many great ideas and opportunities. We don't need other great ideas and opportunities. So I also understand that. So my struggle to do a few of those items, those mini rigs, is obvious.
Oh, we'll get into those, especially because we're going to go over some of the stuff that you worked on, so people could know too directly what you had your hands in.
Going out there.
Yeah, continue.
We'd sit and have the discussion about is this sculpted right, or is this concept doable? In some cases, Lucasfilm had other contracts. The contract with Lego has certain stipulations about how many pieces and the type of play, and so we had to watch out about anything that assembled a certain way and had so many pieces and stuff. So you work through those things. It was those kind of discussions. Never met actors, never did any of that kind of thing. But
just to jump in for listeners, at that time, with Episode 1 was the early inceptions of Lego having that relationship with Lucasfilm with Star Wars Lego, which that along with Harry Potter was the beginning of Lego with their multi-billion-dollar licensing that they would do with other brands, and it started really with Star Wars and Harry Potter. So that's a big deal too. Also, just to bring that in there for a second. So continue. Sorry.
Yeah. So I don't, whatever we want to go from here.
Oh well, I just wanted to know if there's anything else that we could talk about more behind the scenes before we get into the legendary May 3rd midnight opening. Because that's the next stop in this journey, in my opinion. But
yeah, well, I would like to say Star Wars always meant something to Kenner. It was very special to Kenner, and it was a big deal when we got that license to those of us inside the building. Because we felt like, in no way ownership, but certainly a partnership going way back, and it was nice that we were able to continue that.
Oh, since the beginning of Kenner.
Yeah. Or for the beginning of Star Wars with Kenner,
Yeah.
So that was the only worry, like, man, if we don't get this, that's really going to be a bummer. Not that we thought anybody else could, would do it the same way, but...
Do you think the success of Power of the Force also kind of really fostered them getting it too?
It showed our interest and the ability to, see where the Star Wars universe with fandom was at the time. Towards the end, I think we were doing some things to make sure we got the license. If you look at that Boba Fett figure, there's more paint on that figure than any toy that Kenner made.
You're referring to the Kenner Wave 1 Boba Fett, right?
Yeah,
I love that one.
I mean, that figure at the time.
You could take off the armor pieces, like you could take off the backpack. Yeah, like to me, again, today it's like we take that for granted. Back then, as a kid, like that was like same thing. Like the Jedi Knight Luke, which just had a plastic sculpted cloak, like just one piece.
Yep.
That just but to me, that was like such a big deal back then, because it's like you could have Luke without it or Luke with it with the little hood.
Yeah.
And it was, to me, I loved it.
So I think we were tactically probably doing some of those figures just to show that we could do things more accurately or more detailed, that we wouldn't, shortchange the characters in their deco, I guess, or show that we could do that intricate of detail in the scale or whatever. Those things are always tactical in a way, but I definitely, like, if you look at if you look at it very practically and cost structure wise and value per whatever, the paint on Boba Fett is probably half the figure cost of another character.
Well, I was about to say,
just the paint. It's ridiculous.
For people that aren't aware, sometimes what happens is a wave is done of characters or figures, and how the paint budget is done is sometimes what you could do, it's not per individual figure, sometimes you could take away from one character and put more into another.
Yep.
And that's Jax and the guys who do the WWE stuff is notorious for doing that with some wrestlers that have more, I guess, elaborate attire, and some that are more just black trunks and boots.
Yep.
And they plan that in advance. They'll know, we're going to have a character that's going to have...
It works on the outset, but later on, and you're ratioing, and someone wants that figure back in the line, it really is a headache.
Yeah.
They should all just cost what they should cost, because it becomes a nightmare. Oh,
totally. So let's jump into... Now, this is another big deal, not just for Star Wars, but just, I think, for geekdom as a whole in a lot of ways. The very first big midnight deal for action figures. We're jumping to May 3rd, going into May 4th, because it was a midnight. It was May 2nd going into May 3rd. It was a midnight opening. Toys R Us across the United States and Canada. The midnight opening, the debut of Episode 1 Star Wars figures. Where were you at that time? Because there's tons of footage online of people that were standing in line, all these grown individuals. I love looking at this footage because there's this one where you have this family and they're carrying a baby. And you look at that baby now and you go, that baby is 22 years old today.
I was at a Toys R Us up the road from where I was living. Me and my friend Wayne Losey were there. He's a toy designer that did a lot of things too, stick fuzz and stuff. It was our local Toys R Us, and we knew the manager there from way back. Wayne knew him from living in Cincinnati, so that's the guy that actually hooked me up with my PlayStation 2 and whatnot on day release, which was awesome.
Day one release?
Yeah, that's how I got my DVD player. Anyway.
Yeah, that was everyone's first DVD player.
Yeah, everybody's first DVD player, if you knew what you were doing. Yeah. And so, I was there. I stood in line and waited for people. Obviously, I wasn't anticipating buying much. But I did walk out of there with, I think, the Gungan Sub Lego build and something else. So, I experienced it. It was cool. No one knew what they were looking at, because the commercial or the trailer had just launched, maybe?
So for context for
what's
people...
the order?
So the trailer, there was... Okay, so to really go knee-deep into it, there was first, teaser schematic stuff that Lucas put out on StarWars.com when people... Again, also keep in mind what the internet was back in 97. Wasn't really as mainstream. So people didn't really have access to this. So that was out there for people. Obviously, people would get their hands on it, so it would show up on Entertainment Tonight, and they'd be able to see it that way. But the first trailer came out, I want to say it was mid-April, showed this and that. It was just, I remember, that was just playing on loop for so many people online and everything. It would show up once in a while. Again, Entertainment Tonight would have the trailer as an exclusive. This is before the days of YouTube and stuff, and not everyone had the internet back then. And then you get to May 3rd, this stuff comes out. Now keep in mind, May 3rd, May 3rd, the action figures debut. We're going to have the Los Angeles movie debut on the 16th. So we're still talking. We're 2 weeks away from the world seeing the movie.
I remember people going through the bins, so to speak, because they were often in bins at an opening night. Mm-hmm. Is Rick Oley supposed to be good? Is like no one knew the depth of the characters yet. You could tell if they were good or bad, but you really didn't know how they were going to live in this franchise. So that was interesting. People not knowing. Everybody wanted Darth Maul. Everybody wanted C-3PO if they could get it. But the other characters, it was just
like, just to jump in for the speculators at the time, because I was living that world. Let me tell you. Whew. Darth Maul, first version, Wave 1, was the hot ticket item. Everyone who walked into Toys R Us's, that was the go-to. If you were going to walk out, if you were told one item you were going to walk out with, everyone wanted that Wave 1 Darth Maul. There was other Darth Maul product, but specifically that single-carded. It's the one today, like if people want to know specifically, it's the one that has the cloak that more covers his legs and stuff, double-bladed lightsaber. That was a big-ticket item. Resale market at the time, MSRP $3.99 at Toys R Us, was reselling between $30 to $70 back then. Depending on, again, this is early eBay, or eBay was rolling around too, 99, 2000, eBay was just starting. But even people were taking out ads in newspapers and saying, hey, I got the Darth Maul, because that was, if people were going to go get it. It got so crazy that I got information here. It says that Kenner at one point re-released cases only of Darth Maul.
Yes.
Because that was the go-to.
I do remember that.
Yeah. So just a little piece of trivia there, that was the like everything else, was, people were curious. Hey, who's this Anakin kid? Like maybe. So, speculators, collectors, they're picking up one of everything anyways. But if there was people that were just eyeing one thing, it was that first Darth Maul figure.
Yeah. So let me take you back into the office a little bit at that time.
Go ahead.
Too, on how we were doing all this. Explain that we had access to the information, but we couldn't allow access out, right? So how do you communicate with manufacturers and design partners and vendors without giving them any information? We had a whole system where everything had coded names. There was a number. Nothing was related to Star Wars. It was so crazy. It was a real pain to develop. And since everything was so global and a big deal, the volume of product needed to fill all those, let's just say, Toys R Us spaces for that day had to be planned out well in advance. And that's all we did was track these projects for years, it seemed. Because it was such a big deal that when an item is going to be made in the millions of millions, it's a big deal. That's a lot of volume of plastic to be put into machines and then packaged and shipped and then, put on store shelves. Huge volume. And then if you're talking spaceships and 50 other figures and everything else, play sets, and oh my goodness, it was that was the most statistics-driven scheduling and hard-driving engineer scheduling that I've ever seen. By far.
That's why I go back to where it's like I've never seen, in my opinion, since the amount of licensing done for a brand ever. Like Episode 1 was this big deal.
Yeah.
It
just overtook. Not overtook Kenner, but it was a lot of work for the people on it, and it was a big team. And it was the best minds in some cases doing this, and it was something. You could tell the scope of the project, and I'd only been in the business 3-4 years at that point, So it was my first experience in that scale. And Batman and Robin and stuff, those were big movies. Those were number one boys' toys Hasbro had or Kenner had at the time. So it wasn't like I was working on, some small brand, Waterworld or something. Let's zing that one. So yeah, it was really impressive. And then I would take all that statistical information on every project out to Lucasfilm, and we'd go through where every item was in the various development that we needed to discuss with them. So it was not loose. A lot of people think the toy industry is a lot of fun. In this case, it was
probably a logistics nightmare.
Hardcore, yeah.
Yeah. So let's get to the big one. First, we have in Los Angeles its own little big debut, May 16th, 1999, and then, of course, the rest of the world, May 19th, 1999.
All right.
Episode 1 debuts. Where were you? Did you see it day one? Did you see a pre-screening? Did you get like some kind of private thing? What was your story?
All right, let's backtrack that. May 19th was a
here
what?
We go. May 19th. Oh boy.
Was that a Wednesday?
I don't know. I should have checked that actually, probably.
Right.
Let's pull out.
I saw the movie in theaters 3 times before the midnight screening.
Okay, so just for
or no, not
context
before.
Here.
So I saw it. We saw the company screening on a Sunday before it was released. We did.
Okay.
I saw the movie before it was released.
I'll just for context here. So May 3rd, the toy debut was on a Monday. That midnight thing. So that was a Sunday night going into a Monday morning.
Yep.
May 16th in Los Angeles, the private screening was a Sunday evening. And then the May 19th, which was the worldwide debut, was a Wednesday.
Yeah.
Interesting.
So I can backtrack it. I saw it the first showing. Oh my goodness. Let's go back. All right. So that Sunday previous was the Hasbro Kenner showing that we had at a local theater. Mm-hmm. And we had it, I think it was running on 3 screens because everybody was allowed to bring one friend or family member, which I thought was pretty crazy, right?
Yeah, that is pretty crazy because
you
know what, pre-internet. So
yeah, well, exactly.
Yeah, I think that's why, because you know why we have such this reaction today. Oh my God, he would have been on Twitter tomorrow.
Yeah,
and everyone would know everything,
And then we had Then I went to the midnight showing. I think I did that on my own with my friends. Then we had a team showing the Wednesday it debuted before it debuted to people again. You know what I mean? So if the theater was going to run it at noon, we saw it at like 9:30 or something.
Okay.
So I saw it because that was a private screening for our team.
Yeah.
Before the regular. So I saw it 3 times, I guess, before people could see it. Other than the midnight showing, I guess.
Then let's put it this way. So now...
And then we went a 4th time later the next week. Because it was the... So let me explain why.
Okay, go ahead. Yeah, I want to hear it.
When we got all that information from those photos, all we got were actors standing there. We never saw animatics. We never saw the movement. So if you look at, like, for instance, the battle droids, they're pretty much in a T-pose because they sent us the CG assets.
The CG assets from
We
Lucasfilm,
had no idea that they kind of hobbled around and bounced and looked kind of awkward. We were led to believe they were kind of, the new Stormtroopers, so we thought they were going to be tougher and more upright, not so goofy. So that's a perfect example. Like, until you see the movie and these things moving, you're like, oh.
You're expecting more of a wide stance. Instead, they were very rigid.
Yeah,
in a lot of ways.
Yeah, different stuff. So, so as designers, then it was like immediately like, okay, this is what we've already made. This is where we're at with the stuff that's already in the pipeline. But what are people seeing and hearing and saying now that the movie's actually out? And what now that we know more information, what other items and types of things should we do?
Mm-hmm. So now the next question is especially this. So what did you think? Now you've seen it 4 times. I mean, more than probably anyone even before the first debut.
Yeah.
What did you feel from, number one, from a creative perspective, and number two, just your own honest opinion, being a fan of the brand up to that point, the 3 movies? How did it sit in your stomach? I'll give my opinion afterwards quickly. It's not as important, but, as a fan myself, but
yeah.
How did it sit with you?
I don't think I enjoyed it. Like, I didn't consume it and go, oh yeah, it was great. It was fine. Star Wars for me was a lot about the spaceships and stuff. Mm-hmm. And those spaceships in Episode 1 particularly weren't that appealing to me, and what they did and how they operated. So, and then the creatures, and Jar Jar being the lead creature, and also my, licensing kind of bugaboo. I didn't relate to that character as much as I had hoped that they made it sound like we would. So I'd spent a lot of work kind of going, all right. So, I was not a hater. I was not like, but I was very practical. I mean, I was in my mid-20s. I was like, maybe it's not for me, I kind of bought well, Jar Jar's for the kids, kind of stuff. And that's fine. I was trying to make kid product. So, for me, it was fine. It was fine. Wasn't going to change my world. But I will tell you, after the 3rd, 4th, 5th, 6th time, I did fall asleep in the pod racer scene a lot.
Oh, I'll get into that for me. As someone who's also done
so that tells me like the most exciting part of the film, one of them anyway. If you start falling asleep after the 4th viewing, then okay, something's not right.
So here's
I don't want to, totally crap on it either, but
yeah, 16-year-old Daniel, Protoman, going with his buddies. One of them a ridiculously huge Star Wars fan. Like what was Transformers for me was Star Wars for him. It was, you go to his house, it was everything. We went as a huge group, and when we left the theater, the general consensus, you have casual fans, people that weren't really into Star Wars, hardcore fans, and people who were just big sci-fi. The general consensus was that lightsaber battle at the end, Chef's Kiss, everyone loved that. That was, up to that point, what we knew of lightsaber battles.
Yep.
No offense to what we saw up to that point with Return of the Jedi and Empire Strikes Back and the cumbersome battle in New Hope. But the point is that we've never seen anything like that up to that point. Shout out to Ray Park, I think his name was, correct?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I worked with him again on G.I. Joe as Snake Eyes.
He made lightsaber battles a whole another level,
Yeah.
So we really ate that up. That was great. I do agree with you. The spaceships were completely forgettable. X-Wings and TIE Fighters, they were not. In fact, I even challenge people to remember what the villain spaceships were. You might remember, though, the Naboo fighters with their yellow kind of pattern, but what were the villains? No one remembers. I remember leaving the theater going like, what was the TIE Fighter equivalency? And as someone, especially at 16, who was getting into cars, and later on in my life doing motorsports and then mechanics, the pod racing scene was time I wanted back from my life. I remember sitting in the theater and going, you know what? I love watching Formula One. I love watching motor racing, but I never thought that if you would have told me, like, if someone would have said to me, hey, we're going to take Luke Skywalker and we're going to have him playing hockey, would you find that exciting? I love hockey. I love Luke Skywalker. I don't like these two together. And I think it was the same thing. It reminded me, it's like, I love racing. I love watching Formula One. I love Star Wars. But the pod racing scene was just like, to me, it was just like, I don't know how long that went on, 30 minutes? But it was just 30 minutes of, and it was just me, I'm not really excited about this. And I did karting in my youth, like go-karting, so I have even like a background in that. And it was just not exciting to me. And I think that there was...
I had more fun with the video games, for sure, of that.
Oh, well, that's a whole other animal. Yeah. When you're getting into N64 pod racer,
yeah, that was awesome.
Story. But
it redeemed it, but yeah.
That's when you're getting involved in it, and you're playing. But I think as a viewing audience, I think that the big, a friend of mine who was not a big Star Wars fan really summed it up for me. And he said, you know what? All the beats were there, but they were missing a Han Solo character. And I remember when he said that, I was like, you're right. Like we had our Luke in a sense. We had our Princess Leia. We had our Darth Vader. We had all of those. We had our C-3PO. We had our R2-D2. They were already there. But where was our Han Solo? We didn't really have it because we had two Obi-Wans in a sense, in Qui-Gon and Obi-Wan. Maybe Obi-Wan a little bit also was, I don't know what Obi-Wan was really trying to be. He's kind of the Luke, but not the Luke, because that's supposed to be Anakin. So it was like, where's our Han Solo? Like he said that, and that was interesting when he said that because I never really thought of that perspective.
Yeah, well, the first one, the first three are, they're kind of set up as classic fairy tales without getting too much in the weeds.
Oh, yeah.
Save the princess,
George Lucas
get your dad back together.
Yeah.
But episode 1, I said it in the Netflix show, banking and political intrigue and senatorial debate.
The scroll.
It's just like you want to, as a toy person, you're just like, can you put a list of words together that kids don't know, don't care about, and doesn't jive with how they want to act? It's like like literally the worst stuff.
You have the first 5 seconds of episode 1. Here comes the opening scroll, and it's like the Republic of Senate, and it's just like, so all the things that kids didn't watch the news for when 6 o'clock and the cartoons were done, that they switched off. And this is what we're gonna put.
And that is why they needed a Han Solo character to counteract all that stuff.
You needed someone to lighten the mood.
Yep.
And again, like that came from a friend who wasn't really a Star Wars fan, but he felt like that was the thing that was missing. And it was a very observant thing that he brought up that was just like, yeah, you're right. Like every other beat was pretty much covered. You could argue the storytelling is different, as opposed to, let's say, A Force Awakens to episode 4 that was a lot more similar. But still, there was just something absent there in a lot of ways. We'll get into the numbers here. So budget, $15 million. That's not counting, obviously, advertising. That's a whole other story. But I'm pretty sure they must have made that back just in licensing alone. Box office, from a budget of $15 million, box office, $1.27 billion. So regardless of our opinions, a win, to say the least, a W for Lucasfilm and everyone involved. So, in 21st Century Fox, or 20th Century Fox at the time. And so needless to say, they were very happy with the money that came in. So, but let's go back again to the toy world now. So, movie comes out. Yep. Now people have been able to chew and digest the meal, right?
Yep.
And again, someone like you got to see it 4 times. I saw it twice in theaters just because I wanted to really then get, I saw it a second time again with that hardcore Star Wars friend. Now we could have, now it's not people yelling in the theater, oh my God, when Darth Maul got cut in half. Spoiler for anyone who hasn't seen it 22 years later. If you're watching this, I don't know. Anyways, I question things. But either way, like it was a different reaction audience this time around. Now, it's not the day one hardcore fans. It's just the general audience. I think we saw like 2-3 weeks after the fact. So we're actually able to absorb the movie over the hoot and hollering. And it just, now we're looking back at the toys. Because here we are, we bought Darth Maul day one. Everyone's scalping this guy. And here we're learning that he had 2 lines? Yeah. Actually, I think it was 2 lines. And died. Which is just here's the guy that we thought was going to be our Vader for the next 3 episodes, if anything, right? Here's the big build-up, because we're comparing to the past. And he's out. He's gone. See you later. Down the shaft, cut in half. And it was very interesting to see the reaction then afterwards, where I remember everyone shifted from Darth Maul was going to be the big deal. Here he is on the toy packaging. He's literally on the toy packaging. And everyone walked out of that theater, or even seeing the second, third time, going, you know what? I kind of liked Obi-Wan. He's the young, brash, he was, a lot of people were kind of leaning on that one.
Yep.
They were going into it thinking Darth Maul was going to be the man. And then they came out of it going you know what, Anakin was annoying, and I kind of like Obi-Wan, and, well, Qui-Gon's dead. Yeah. So it's you kind of walk out of it going because when you look at, let's say, episode 4, you walk out of it and, the only person that died was technically Obi-Wan. You could argue all the bad guys that were, Grand Moff Tarkin and stuff like that, but it's a different story. But, no one was,
all those contractors on the Death Star?
Yeah, it's no kid was going Mommy, I want the Grand Moff Tarkin figure. Why did they kill him off? But you killed off Darth Maul, who was going to be your your merchandise king,
well,
you would think.
Yeah.
So, like, we walk out of that theater, and some of those characters that were potentially going to be toys for time to come in a sequel were now dead.
Yeah.
And
so
now, granted, we could get into the argument of what's going to come later on, too. But, okay, we're going to have Jango Fett. Don't worry about it. But the point is that it's from the fan perspective, we were very like, this is a very interesting direction they took.
Well, even from our perspective, I think it was kind of surprising to see, we were pitched things like, oh, Rick Oley is going to be kind of like the new Han Solo pilot, like kind of like
really
your slick pilot guy that's going to come in and do amazing stuff. Well, that didn't really happen.
Most people don't even know who Rick Oley is,
exactly.
I guarantee.
Yeah.
Like,
so, and
is
then
that the
there
name
was
of the actor? People are probably going, is that the name of the actor or the character?
And then, like, the Naboo guard character was supposed to be something cool, so we made a lot of him, and so, everybody was kind of then left with, oh, this is what we were told, this is what the assets we were given. It was all super secret. No one exactly knew how the pieces were going to go together. But now that we have, why the heck did we make these choices?
Yeah.
Very simply. Why did we decide to make that old man in the suit after all? Sio Biffle or something. We thought that the Amidala outfits might be more important or interesting, and I don't know if they were for product sales. Stuff like that, that just got really weird. Jar Jar obviously is a discussion that always comes up with episode
that's
1.
That's a podcast almost in itself.
Yeah. So, we had a lot of Jar Jar in the line, and then that, how are we going to deal with that? Because there was so much venom. I think subtly what happened along with the toys is the venom.
I'll slide in there.
Building.
So I'll slide in there. So in terms of shelf warming from the toy market standpoint, it was Anakin Skywalker with backpack.
Yep.
And Jar Jar Binks, I guess we'll call it vanilla Jar Jar Binks, not the one with the fish, the one that was like just the vanilla one, the first wave one, were the two biggest shelf warmers of them all. So essentially what I do want to get into now is let's talk about some of the stuff that you worked on specifically, and maybe we could go through the creative process of it, because now the people could see, they'll be like, oh, hey, I own this. Aaron worked on that. Now I could learn more about something that's been sitting in my house my whole life. So let's jump into, we'll start first with the mini rigs. I guess we'll call them. So for people that aren't familiar, what are mini rigs exactly, anyways?
Mini rigs, at least internally to Kenner Hasbro, was a term used for any of those Star Wars, and then ultimately Jurassic Park and some other things. Batman off-camera vehicles, things that look like they fit into that universe, but just must have been on some other person's, or just off-camera, didn't make the final cut kind of thing. Sometimes they're considered pre-production or concept art toys, but in this case, we often were creating from scratch. So that's kind of what they're called. So.
So we'll put some on the screen because we're going to show
there were some Hoth ones back in the day, but the ones I worked on were.
So we have here the Sith Attack Speeder with Darth Maul, one example of it from episode 1. What was the process with that? Would you say, how that came about?
Well, the one I did was the probe droid.
Okay, that one, yeah.
Kind of expanded. So this talks about that toyetic nature that I got brought onto the team to do. Mm-hmm. How can we take assets that Lucasfilm feels very, special about and not change them, rather offer new glimpses as to what they might do or scales that they might have of them. So in the movie, you saw that Darth Maul had this probe round thing that he sent out to look for the main guys on Tatooine. We took that idea and blew it out, tried to bring feature to it and bring logic to it also, so that it did fit into the universe somehow. I did an Anakin, an Obi-Wan Gungan one-man personal subcraft kind of thing.
Gungan scout sub with Obi-Wan Kenobi.
Yeah, with big pincher kind of things. Trying, again, to say, this is very much of the universe. It just isn't seen on the camera view of the edit, So,
it's part of the world building.
Yeah.
But it's not something that was seen on screen. Although, again, that Obi-Wan figure comes with, it's unique to itself. It has a little, I guess, like apparatus for breathing.
Yeah, the breather
which was seen in the movie.
Yeah. So what we tried to do with those things is that's how we could bring play feature into the line and also maintain a certain price point, because any big movie, they make a range of vehicles and things the characters use, but they're not always the same scale, and it becomes problematic to create a wave of a certain price point in some cases if there's not enough content in the movie per se to develop that price point. So this was a way to create a standard price point in that Star Wars universe by using things that were kind of like what you've seen in the movie. So the small tank, the battle droid tank, mini tank.
Armored scout tank with battle droid, which, by the way, got repainted for the Clone Wars and onward would see a lot of use, that mold. Yeah.
So that one I picked up towards the middle end from another designer, and I got to do the deco and different stuff in the figure. My birthday is on the back of that figure, written in that dot dash kind of script that the battle droids are all numerically numbered by.
You have to find a photo of that.
All right. There you go. Little inside ball.
There you go.
So yeah, that's why those things exist the way they did, and that is probably the most success that I had under that goal of bringing more feature to Star Wars. It was not well received by Lucasfilm. They really weren't hearing it, and Episode 2 started, and just we just moved on. So that's part of what happened there with those things.
One thing I want to cover too, you also have these 3 packs that you did. You did the Tatooine Showdown, you did the Mos Espa Encounter, and then you have Watto's box. These ones are clearly based off of scenes in the movie.
Yep.
And in the timeline of designing these, because these are very specific sculpts, specific backgrounds, it's clearly trying to be like almost like a screenshot.
Yep, that's
from
exactly
the movie.
Yep.
At what period were these developed and designed that you were able to pull off something like this?
Yeah. So again, I picked these up from a designer. So when I came on the team, everybody gave me several projects to load me up, right? Because if you just start from scratch on everything, you wouldn't have a lot to do. So these are things I inherited kind of halfway through. So I handled the deco, the sculpting, and then the artwork from behind. But when they were pitched, that's exactly what they were. They were kind of 3D, snapshots from the movie. I don't always know. We were doing them in other segments, the Power of the Force segment too, not just the Episode 1.
Yeah.
So it was kind of a format that at the time was being done. It was a good price value for us to put 3 figures in that package and sell it for the price that we were selling it at. So I don't really know the order, but we were working on those pretty early. So I think we had set shots.
Okay.
That we would send those out.
They're pretty well done. That's why I'm very curious in the timeline of it.
Well, we'd have people go in and remove figures and clean up the backgrounds and stuff. So
now,
it was pretty weird.
What's also worth mentioning with these was it also was a very strong reflection of how different Episode 1 figures were from what was being done with Power of the Force at the time. This goes back to the 5 points of articulation, maybe some knee articulation. These ones, especially when you look at even some of the just single-carded Episode 1 figures, we were going into different kind of poses, different kinds of articulation. Again, these multi-packs we're just referring to here, you look at the poses that are done here. They're still articulated figures, but they're done in very unique, dynamic poses that up to that point were really absent in Star Wars outside of the other dynamic posed box sets you mentioned before.
Yeah.
So there was a bit of a shift too in style with Episode 1.
Yeah, the goal of that was to bring that scene to life as is, and whatever that needed. Again, I don't know if we always pick the best scenes for that type of action.
Sometimes you don't know what's going to be iconic and what won't.
Yeah, exactly. What I remember about some of those, like Watto's box, that orange character in the blue robe.
Yeah. His name is Grassal. I know there's going to be a Star Wars fan that's going to be yelling at me. Grassal Kibvin.
Yeah.
Kibvin.
At the time, and I don't know if this is different now, but at the time, he was the tallest 3 3/4 inch figure.
I can believe it. Look at that head. Jeez.
Because he's like articulated his waist.
And he's sitting in that
the
box.
He's sitting down, yeah. So that was a slight claim to fame that I had for a while, if it's still intact, that was the tallest Star Wars figure.
Has some nice soft goods on him too, which
Yeah.
was not very common with a lot of the 3-inch Star Wars toys. Most of them, if they did have capes, they were plastic.
Yeah. So that's kind of what I remember about those items.
Now, I know I would be remiss if I didn't cover this, because I'm pretty sure maybe even some people were yelling. Let's talk about Episode 1, and let's talk about Comm Tech.
Okay.
And the choice to go with this, it really hasn't been revisited afterwards. Like when they went into Episode 2 and 3, they were like, well, that was a thing. So the choice to do Comm Tech, this for people who aren't familiar, it was this little chip that doubled as a stand. You bought a separate device that wasn't included with the toy that you would then put the stand over, and it would say lines, assumably from the movie. Some of the lines were not from the movie, but I think Darth Maul had more lines with his Comm Tech than he did in the movie. But that's probably another story. So explain to me the process of how that came to be.
Okay, so it will start big and then go smaller.
Yeah.
The big thing is every line needs an overriding thing to communicate, right? It's not just enough to go, hey, Star Wars figures, right? There has to be something to say. And since I've already previously talked about how Lucasfilm was very much make them like they are, hold the small plastic weapons, fit inside spaceships easily, that's kind of where we were going. So there was no feature, right? There was no active thing to promote any different than something we made 20 years prior to that. So Comm Tech is a reaction to having something to communicate. And it's kind of movie-centric, right? You can bring something to life that otherwise wasn't. So that is the big overriding why a company would want to get into something like this. What it actually was an inventor concept of being able to embed some sort of chip inside a figure, and when that figure is playing with a playset, voice-activated triggers are hit, just like it actually plays out with the Comm Tech reader.
Yeah.
What happened along the way of development was you really couldn't embed that little microchip that's in the stand into the figure efficiently and do the volume that we were doing, right? It was going to be, for every Comm Tech chip that got messed up in a plastic figure, that whole figure had to be trashed, right? So that was a technical problem that had to be overcome. Depending on the type of figure, there was too much plastic, too thick, too whatever. The chip never was going to fit.
The kind of plastic used too for that kind of technology.
Maybe it would bleed, muffle it out or whatever the signal.
Yeah.
Some figures are just. Where would you put that in a battle droid?
Or a small little Anakin.
Or so there were problems from the get-go that were being overcome before I got to the team. Because by the time I got to the team, they had settled on the chip. And then settled on that real world,
Well, it was smart in a sense. They made it a stand.
Yeah.
So it still had it wasn't just an accessory that would have been thrown into a box.
Yeah.
If you're going to display your figures, you had a stand at least.
So that's all good. Now, what that also does is that's all a design-led responsibility. If you add a feature to the toy, it's yours to figure out. So that meant every designer had to become an audio expert, had to become a just signals expert in a way of how that stuff worked and
frequency,
how much bass or treble you could get. Some voices recorded very well with that small size chip, or would sound good with that size small speaker, and others had problems. So it was really a lot to learn, and maybe not the best place to kick the tires on that kind of technology, but it is what it was.
Would you say that's probably why it didn't return?
Well, just like mini-cons and Transformers, the next year we need something different. You know, they were never going to do it again.
But while mini-cons did return for Transformers, because as a concept,
but
it's still
there's no big underlying electronic need.
Yeah, I guess so. Yeah.
You know,
well, because it's let's say, did Project Comm Tech, would you consider it a failure or a success when it was all said and done?
From the toy side of my business, I would say it did what it needed to do. From a lasting memory and great play experience for kids that'll stand the test of time, no, it's more ironic and iconic for that reason.
Yeah, for the bad reasons. Yeah.
Not because it brought so much life to the toys. So again, I'm going to see things from both sides of the fence.
Oh, well, that's what we want. So,
but I could see why it wasn't. It didn't engage play. If I'm plodding along with my guy, I got to have the stand on him, and where's the stand go if I put him in the spaceship? And there were inherent issues, no doubt, but they needed that marketing communication, and that's how they delineated themselves from other, toy product.
Now, I just want to cover one more thing. It's kind of almost a little bit outside of episode 1, but you also had work on a Han and Chewie classic figure here. What was the story with that?
Yeah, so my friend Steve Bono was in charge of those 2 packs, I think they were.
Yeah.
And I just helped him one day when he was in a pickle. He had a lot of work to get done. He was working on the Queen ship for episode 1 and all the electronics and scale and everything that went with that. So
yeah, that's the reason why I bring it up, because it happens like in the same timeline of episode 1. It's interesting.
So Steve is a very classic Star Wars guy. He did a lot of he did the Darth Vader face reveal, Luke Skywalker toy, and did a lot of fun Star Wars figures from a fan, from a deep fan point of view that we had never seen. But he was knee deep in that Queen ship. It was a big, that was a main item, obviously, in some respects, as far as a playset went for episode 1. So yeah, I just helped him out with those inputs, and it was fun to go back into my little kid hat and go back to that old Kenner puzzle and reference that photo of Han and Chewie fighting on the deck of the Falcon. So it was just a one-off fun one I got to do.
And last thing I really want to jump into, so you worked on a bunch of Jar Jar figures. You worked on one that came with a little fish here. So you designed the fish, I guess, on this swimming Jar Jar figure here?
Yeah, so swimming Jar Jar was my big innovation for Jar Jar, because he didn't really change his outfit.
So of all the 3-inch stuff, all of these designs obviously straight from Lucasfilm, but this, you have the 3-inch Jar Jar, swimming Jar Jar, and he comes with a little fish, and that's Aaron original OC creation.
Not really.
Oh, not really? Okay.
Here's the deal. They had Lucasfilm or LucasArts or whoever, ILM, they had designed dozens of fish.
Okay.
Dozens of fish. I got to pick what fish.
You got to pick the fish.
I got to pick the fish.
It's like you went to the restaurant. You got to pick the fish.
And that's what it felt like. So that's my big story on the fish.
Okay, because it's always been peculiar, because it's like that's his accessory, and I'm just like, is there some kind of originality with that? Because again, it's not like that was like a featured screen character or something that's like, oh, remember Jar Jar and his pet fish?
Yeah, no, well, just when he was swimming around, they had fish around them. That was about it.
Alrighty. So just to close it off, we're gonna wrap this one up on episode 1. So what do you think you pretty much got here? Here's you again. You said 3 years in the company. What did you take out of now working on episode 1 that helped you moving forward as a toy designer and even like project manager later on? What did you take out of Star Wars with episode 1? Like, because again, when you're on a big project like that, you're not going to walk out of it without a few scars and a few, you learn something from it with a scraped knee.
A couple. I think my interactions with Transformer licensees later in my career.
You're saying like movie specifically?
No, like
or?
people who license Transformers from Hasbro to make.
Okay, just in general. Okay,
yeah. when I would work with them, I tried to be a partner in a different way to help them understand where we were coming from and needed, but also try to understand who their market was better. Kind of as a reaction to how I felt we weren't always understood at Lucasfilm. So I tried to create a better level understanding of each other's needs. Mm-hmm. So I think I came away with that because I didn't like the thumbs up, thumbs down approach that Lucasfilm had, whether something was going to be approved or not.
Well, that's where it's going to be interesting when we get into other brands.
Yeah, every partner is very different in what they look for and how they respond and the process they go through to approve things. Some are very fast, some are very laborious. So that's one. And then another one that came up for me during my Transformer era is, if you remember episode 1, I think they took I want to say 3 pictures of Darth Maul. And they put those 3 pictures on 1 million products.
Everything.
And
you
honestly...
You would thought he was Vader.
I honestly believe that we were so sick of those 3 photos that it hurt the overall impression of the Enterprise. I really do.
Really?
I got so sick of seeing those items. So when I got into Transformer, I never wanted us to promote just one image to its detriment. So that's a little subtle, a little in the weeds, but that is a takeaway that I had.
Interesting. No, it's something that it helps get a better understanding of how you then handled other brands later, where you could look at Transformers and go, oh, they didn't use that same control art of Optimus Prime across 17 different pieces of media.
Yeah.
You know?
I mean, if you see a magazine cover, a book cover, a toy thing, a Trapper Keeper folder, a bookmark, a mug, it all starts to feel... That's why it felt like a corporate endeavor, not a beloved expression of a character that you want to have in different ways for different reasons. That's how I felt about it. It was like, okay, golly, you guys take more photos.
So the last thing I want to ask is, what is Star Wars with Aaron Archer today? How do you engage with that brand today as a fan and also professionally? Obviously, the professional part has gone in a different direction with Disney and stuff now, but as a fan, how do you enjoy Star Wars today?
I still try to like it for the reasons I liked it. I like the magicians, the spaceships, and the creatures. I grew up in the kind of the war aspect of things, so I do like the Clone Wars and Rebels very much, because it's got the space battles and the things I like out of Star Wars. I like the Disney Plus stuff so far. Mandalorian's cool, but again, that harkens back to everything that I grew up with. I mean, when that Stormtrooper troop transport thing rolled in, I was like, "Are you kidding me?" If people even remember that from the Kenner days, it's amazing. Much less seeing it in a big time entertainment. It was like, wow, awesome. So I like those things for those reasons. They're nostalgic for me. But the newer stuff, it goes where it goes. Any of these properties continue on, and
it's never all going to be for you.
Exactly.
That's something that people just really need to understand in a lot of ways. So what we're going to do for the audience here, what we're going to do every segment, we're going to end it with, after you've listened to everything we've discussed, if you have any further questions in relation to Star Wars Episode 1 with Aaron, if you have Twitter, do hashtag the Toy Armada and put your questions. We're going to pick some of the best ones, and in the next segment, at the beginning of it, we're going to cover some people's questions. And that's why we saved it for the end, because just in case if something you asked has already been answered. And we'll definitely bring that up and everything like that. So I hope you guys learned something today. I hope, Aaron, you had a good time, Aaron?
Yeah, it was great.
Yeah, it was great to
really retro.
Yeah, but that's the whole point. We're trying to really get into the weeds of how this stuff is created and everything. And I hope Episode 1 here with Episode 1 is going to give you an idea of what we're going to be doing in the future with all the different brands and stuff. And again, Aaron, thanks for being with us.
Thank you.
And so this is the Toy Armada with Aaron Archer, and I'm your hostess with the mostest, Protoman. And hope to hear from you guys soon, and check out all our future content.